I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we're talking about The Rules of Attraction, a 2002 film directed by Roger Avary, based on the Bret Easton Ellis novel of the same name. It's a novel I love, actually. I think it's really good. I think all young men go through a Bret Easton Ellis phase, or at least a lot of them do. A disproportionate amount of young men read nothing but Bret Easton Ellis when they're 17 years old. And I know that I treated Less Than Zero and The Rules of Attraction and The Informers particularly as almost as sacred texts, especially because I was finding out just how nihilistic the universe can be. So a lot has already been said on The Rules of Attraction. I love the movie. It's taken me so long to cover it on the channel because there's a lot of grit out there for it. There's a lot of analysis. A lot has been said about this movie. There's a lot of videos on YouTube about this movie, and some of them are pretty good. And it was kind of difficult to find an angle for a while because I don't want to just recite popular readings of the film. So I'm going to try in this video to kind of put my own unique spin on the film and like why a few reasons why I think it's so fascinating that I haven't seen explored before. The Rules of Attraction, make no mistake, is one of the most nihilistic films that I've ever seen in my entire life. I've seen people like offer criticism of Bret Easton Ellis and say that he's actually a moralist, and that might be true of his novels because like in a Fitzgerald-esque sense, it is kind of lamenting and it's mournful of the fact that there is no meaning kind of thing. I think that Roger Avary's view of the rules of attraction is even more bleak and nihilistic than Bret Easton Ellis's. No one ever knows anyone. You will never know me. One of the things I find fascinating is that it's an extremely postmodern film, and I might actually call it like the last great postmodern pop film. You know, I mean, look at the cast. It's made up of Dawson Leary and future stars of The Vampire Diaries. Shannon Sossman was huge. Jessica Biel of Seventh Heaven. It's a lot about like doing this postmodern like inverting of um of young celebrity. And I think it might be the last great postmodern film made for mass audiences, but the last great pop postmodern masterpiece. And I think it's really fascinating because Roger Avary arguably gave us the first great American pop postmodern masterpiece with Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction played with the narrative, with the meta narrative, with the idea of a linear form, with the idea of archetypes, with the idea of genre tropes, limitations, restrictions, and transcendence. Pulp Fiction did an awful lot, and that was 94. So this is almost 10 years. Almost 10 years has passed, and I see the rules of attraction as like the logical endpoint of American postmodernism. I see it as a logical endpoint because it's just complete nihilistic rebellion. I think that what makes the rules of attraction so fascinating is the narrative, is the meta narrative, which uh, allows us to talk about composition for a moment. This film is hyper composed. It is so composed. It's made up of sequences rather than scenes, I guess, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It's just a hyper composed, hyper stylized film that always keeps the audience aware that they're watching something artificial. Hell, I think that in a metacontextual way, it helps keep the characters within the film aware that they are acting, that they are within a designated role, that everything is preordained. There is no luck. The archetypes themselves are fascinating. The rules of attraction gives us these, at least our three main characters, Lauren, Sean, and Paul, provides them with like so many conventional narrative avenues to explore and so many arcs that they could fulfill. You know, but the postmodern tragedy of the American youth culture is that no one can connect with anyone, and that even in our disconnectedness, we are still ultimately alone. But it still provides all these different avenues and arcs for at least our three main characters to pursue, but they are unable to. They don't have the tools necessary to pursue those narratives They don't have the tools necessary. Postmodernism does not provide you with those tools, and nihilism only provides you with a sense of doom and gloom. So we are sort of teased with the idea of a romance story. We are teased with the idea of some sort of triumphant um, a tale of finding meaning in a world that seems devoid of it. We are teased with all of these different options for the narrative that could provide some sense of meaning, some sense of gravitas to the piece, but no character is able to ever follow through on them. Because how do you get to know people? If no one knows anyone, how do you know someone? You know them based on their narratives and you they open up to you through the meta narrative. And if the meta narrative is so convoluted, so hyper stylized, so overcomposed, um, you can't communicate that way, not authentically, not truthfully. And if you live in this nihilistic hellscape that is college, I guess, um, you, you're without hope. You're without hope. I thought Ian Somerhalder was the most compelling actor in the whole piece. I thought that Paul was the most interesting character, especially with his opening voiceover about how everything is preordained and he's sitting against that wall smoking a cigarette. He is so cinema cool in this. I thought he was simply delightful. I thought our three leads were gravitational. They were magnetic. You know, I thought they were great. I just thought that Ian Somerhalder was head and shoulders above the rest, honestly. He was the most captivating character because there was something that was just so pathetically lonely and loathsome about him, about his desperate need to connect with people who obviously don't want to reciprocate the kind of affection and connection that he's searching for. I mean, that's everyone's problem, but I think that it's best expressed through how pitiful Paul can be, just how pitifully he deludes himself and refuses to accept a sort of cosmic and nihilistic rejection. Jessica Biel was wildly good in here too, a bit of an underrated performance. Oh, and she was fucking so hot. I do find it fascinating that Roger Avery was one of the ones who brought this kind of postmodern the visual storytelling, this postmodern filmic vocabulary into living rooms around the world, into normal discussions, and in a large way, he's the one who put the death nail in it as well. He's the one who put postmodernism in a casket. And I've talked about on the channel how I would still call The Rules of Attraction a teen film. It still has that kind of mentality. I would call most films set in college like teen films as well, but talked about how postmodernism, like teen films in high school, just work a lot better because of things like social and class stratification, because of things like the idea that coming of age is a deconstruction of your adolescence. Sincerity doesn't really work in college. If you do a college film, you have to be nihilistic, and I think that the rules of attraction and gossip are the best examples of this, are prime examples of this. You can't make a college film um, without nihilism, or else you're being kind of untruthful. You're being dishonest in a large way. The rules of attraction can be so nihilistic that it's numbing, but that's probably obviously the point, right? But there's a certain point in the film. It's probably when we're on Victor's like insane like methamphetamine fueled montage through Europe. It's probably there that we stop wanting meaningful connections for our characters and just accept the fact that yes, everything is preordained. And just because something is preordained doesn't mean that it's meaningful. It doesn't mean there's a meaning behind the predestination. It simply means that everything is meaningless and that even if you do find meaning, it's all part of like some higher composition. It's all part of some higher some theater, some higher public theater, a greater spectacle or even a lesser spectacle. You know, it doesn't really fucking matter. You stop wanting these characters to even find meaning because you realize that it's impossible. And then when you find that you don't want them to find any meaning, you don't know what you want them to find. You have no aspirations for these characters by the end of the film. None. I think that you're even indifferent about whether they live or die. because without meaning, there is no there is no meaning lost. And I think that the final scene of the film is, I think, at its most beautiful. And also, it's the most dangerous thing that Avery does with the film, where all three characters have gone to the end of the world party. This film is very, very obvious with its metaphors, right? Like it wants to beat you over the head with its nihilism. It has like hyper literal symbolism. Like the needle drops are so obvious that it's mind blowing, right? But you think that that compounding of meaning would make it more meaningful, but it actually makes it more meaningless because of how like easily contained it can be within a pop ballad. But what I'm talking about is the final scene of the film where our three characters had just gone through their ordeals. Each of them had their own humiliations and rejections and a huge loss of innocence at the end of the world party. And Lauren comes out and smokes a cigarette with Paul, which I think is a beautiful moment because they used to date, I believe. And they talk about these missed connections kind of things. Like I thought you were leaving him letters, these purple ones. No, no, like it's impossible to know anyone. It's possible to have any connection. And of course, we see like Sean Bateman on his bike watching them, and then he speeds off. But it's the most dangerous thing that Avery does because that's the scene where it implicates you directly. It places you directly within the extreme nihilism of the piece because I believe Lauren is the one who says there's a lot of people like him out there. There's a lot of people like us, and that it's dangerous because it's more than looking directly into the camera because it's melodramatic, and it's a part where the film is trying to be entirely sincere. You know, like it's dangerous because that is a moment of complete sincerity within a film that lacks any ounce of it, but it works there. It works there because, like I said, if you had lost all aspirations for your three leads by the end of the film because you've been so numb to the nihilistic abandon of the previous hour and 45 minutes, at that point, since you are implicated directly into their archetypes, you no longer have aspirations for yourself. You know that a quest for meaning is pointless. That connection is impossible. That sex can stop being satisfying. That drugs wear off. There are no value judgments. You feel the same way about yourself that you do about the characters. Live or die. It's a shell game. Sure, a large part of the pop postmodern ethos in American film and television was how we all had this existence of the society within the spectacle, life imitating art, imitating life. And that may be true, and our lives are more cinematic, they are more theatrical, they are more composed deliberately, just like the rules of attraction is, just like the film itself is. But just because there's composition doesn't mean there's a design. Just because something is predetermined does not mean that there is any sort of prophecy. Just because you desire love or something meaningful, just because you desire connection, doesn't mean that connection is possible. And just because something's impossible doesn't mean it's not without its small fortunes. I was watching this film and it was like really moving, and I thought it was wonderfully put together. But the whole time, the only thing I could think about was